Ladies and gentlemen, the newest NASA astronaut, Jonathan Kim.
You're a Navy SEAL with a degree from Harvard Medical School.
Dr. Jonathan Kim.
That's just ridiculous.
Exploration is written in our human DNA. When I realized that being an astronaut is really the opportunity to expand our understanding of the cosmos, to make our world a better place, all while inspiring the next generation of children.
You, Julian.
The same children that didn't have the confidence to dream like I did. That was when I realized that I absolutely wanted to be an astronaut. Like a lot of immigrant families, my parents moved to America with the hope of the American dream that their children can have a better opportunity in this world. I had a hard time growing up as a kid. I lacked a lot of things, but the biggest thing I lacked was confidence. I wake up every day and I think about the opportunities I've had. It's hard for me to believe that I'm that same person.
No, you just beam, right? You spend so much effort and hope, and you try to give whatever the student needs to grow and get where they want to be. And then when you see that they get there, it's just thrilling.
It makes me immensely proud to be part of an organization to achieve such a monumental challenge like returning to the moon. And that's what really excites me when I think of Artemis. The lives that we're going to positively impact on this endeavor. It's hard to articulate all of those emotions, but it's wow. I am an astronaut, and I have this amazing opportunity to serve my country and humanity.
To me, he is service above self. I would trust my life to him, and I'm very proud to call him my friend.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more NASA content, be sure
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for our event From the U.S. Military to the Final Frontier, a conversation with Major General Charles Bolden and Dr. Jonny Kim. I hope everyone enjoyed that brief video that gave an introduction to one of our amazing panelists. My name is Nick Maxwell, and I'm the president of Harvard's Alexander Hamilton Society, which is very proud to co-host this event along with the Harvard Undergraduate Veterans Organization. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Alexander Hamilton Society is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with chapters at universities across the country and is dedicated to educating and launching students into foreign policy and national security careers. To that end, we host events like the one tonight, along with debates, career chats, and foreign policy crisis simulations, and we certainly hope you'll join us again in the future. We'll begin this evening with a quick introduction from our moderator, Harvard College professor and Harvard's AHS chapter advisor, Dr. Stephen Rosen, and then we'll hear opening remarks from each of our speakers. We'll be sure, of course, to leave a large amount of time for question and answer so our audience can interact directly with our panelists. So if you'd like to ask a question, please submit it through the Q&A function through Zoom. We'll call on you individually and bring your camera up on the webinar so you can ask your question directly to either of our speakers. If you don't want to be on camera, please explicitly include that in your submitted question, in which case we'll read it on your behalf. Additionally, if you're affiliated with any particular school, please also include that when you submit your question. And with that, I will simply thank our panelists for joining us, and again, thank all of you for tuning in this evening, and turn the floor over to our moderator, Professor Rosen. Professor?
Thank you, Nick. It's my pleasure to be the moderator of this distinguished panel. I will speak as little as possible so as to give the most time to our panelists and to the members of the audience to engage them in discussion. You have two distinguished panelists this evening. The first is General Charles Bolden. General Bolden is a Marine. He with over 100 combat missions flown over Southeast Asia, and an astronaut with 4 missions on the US Space Shuttle. He is now the 12th NASA administrator, and as such, he oversaw the development of the Space Launch System program, the Orion Crew Capsule program, and of course, the Mars Curiosity rover landing program. It is my pleasure to welcome him. Our second panelist will be Dr. Jonny Kim, also a NASA astronaut, a Navy SEAL, as you heard in the video clip we just saw, who has earned the Bronze and Silver Stars, and is also a doctor of medicine, graduating from Harvard Medical School. By prior agreement, General Bolden will speak first, followed by remarks from Dr. Kim, after which we will open the floor to general discussion. General Bolden, it's a pleasure to introduce you to discuss the Artemis program, your life and career in national service, and anything else that you think you would like to present to our audience. General Bolden.
Dr. Rosen, thanks so very much. It's a pleasure to be here, especially to be with my friend Jonny Kim. You know, he's I think we're in a mutual admiration society. I admire everything he's done and everything he's about to do, and so it's a pleasure for me to be with him tonight. Let me thank the two organizations for hosting us tonight. I think it's really important, and just let me offer just a few very brief opening remarks. And since we're talking about public service, people ask me frequently. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, in the segregated South. So I'm an old guy. And I went to school in the 50s and 60s. My mom and dad were school teachers. They had both graduated from high school in my hometown of Columbia, Booker T. Washington High School, and had gone away to Charlotte, North Carolina, to Johnson C. Smith University, which is a historically Black college there in Charlotte. And they graduated and came back home to do what most Black college graduates did in those days. If they didn't go to med school or go to law school, they came back and they became teachers. So people ask me frequently, you know, how did you get interested in public service? I say I was born into it. My mom and dad were lifelong teachers. My father was my high school football coach. He taught me everything I needed to know about civics and social studies. My mother was my middle school librarian, and she was really a hard taskmaster. I worked for her as a library assistant, wrapping books back then in the summertime when the library closed and you didn't want the books to get all covered in dust. So I was born into a family of public service. One of the things that I have come to tell all of my Marines and anyone with whom I serve now is everybody is not going to stay in what they're doing forever. Particularly in the Marine Corps, when we bring young men and women into the Marine Corps, we generally don't expect that they're going to stay for a career, particularly enlisted Marines. That's just not the plan, to be quite honest. But I tell them, some of you will stay around and you'll become sergeants major. Several of you may be the sergeant major of the Marine Corps. If you go into the officer ranks, you may one day become the commandant. But it doesn't make any difference how long you stay. What makes very important is the time you serve, the time that you give for someone other than yourself. And I've always encouraged them to think about what they're going to do in the next part of their life. I kind of startle them because I say I've got two recommendations, and I never thought I would recommend these two professions to anyone, because I eschewed being a teacher when I watched how hard my mom and dad worked and how little money they made. And I never really liked politicians. But I said, you know, when you finish your service, because of the level of expertise that you have, the experiences that you've had, and the leadership skills that you have, think about two things. Think about going back into the classroom as a teacher, or think about getting into politics, because in both those professions, the country dearly needs people who have done something that put themselves after everything else. My leadership, my mantra to everybody about my leadership is take care of your troops and they'll take care of you. You know, if you're worried about where you're going or what you're going to get or what you're going to do, all is lost. So let me really stop there, and I'll let you go on to Jonny, and then we'll try to get to some Q&A.
Thank you, General. As you know, the Alexander Hamilton Society was founded in part to help channel young people interested in national service into careers in politics, national service, and national security. But Dr. Kim, we want to hear from you. Reading your biography, one has to be struck by the fact that you enlisted after high school in the Navy to go to hospital corpsman school. So clearly you had an interest in medicine and medical training, but then you took what some people might see as a little bit of a turn and enlisted in the basic underwater demolition SEALs program. For someone who enlisted in the hospital corpsman's program, what was the process that took you into the SEALs?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me just say, I just want to say how appreciative I am to you, Dr. Rosen, and of course, Major General Charlie Bolden, who you said we're a mutual admiration club. No truer words. Charlie Bolden is a hero of mine, not just for all the accomplishments he's done in human space exploration, but the challenges he's gone through and the moral courage and leadership that is sometimes difficult to exercise, but is so needed in this country. And of course, thank you to the Hamilton Society and the Harvard Undergraduate Veterans Society for organizing this. You know, Charlie Bolden said he was born into service, and I'd have to say that for me, it was more of it kind of fell onto my lap. And I certainly didn't find it, and I will completely admit that when you say I went to become a hospital corpsman and I had an interest in medicine, I will have a confession to make. All I wanted to do, and these were completely selfish reasons, is I just wanted to be an operator. I wanted to be a special warfare operator. And for me, the fastest path, or at least what the enlisted recruiter was telling to a young 18-year-old high school kid, was, son, you got to join you got to enlist and become a hospital corpsman, and then you can go to BUDS. And maybe that was to fill a quota or what. But so for me, it was really luck of how I became a hospital corpsman. And for me, it was always having my eyes on getting to basic underwater demolition SEALs training so I could become a SEAL. And I like to say it was to serve my country. And the timing of it was right after 9/11. Of course, those were factors that galvanized my decision. But the heart of why I wanted to enlist was truly individual. It was really more of a selfish path for me. And I was lucky enough that along my odyssey, I found this path of service that is so sustainable and gives back more than you could ever give to it. So that was a long-winded answer, but
it's a great answer, because it shows how by engaging in national service, you can also pursue your deeply felt individual passions. But let me ask you the flip of that question. It's not every SEAL that goes on to go to Harvard Medical School. What was the process that led you to decide to transition out of the SEALs and pursue what seems to be a rather difficult, maybe equally demanding career, but certainly not one that every SEAL endeavors to pursue? How'd you make that decision?
You know, it was one of service. It was one of also, it was an emotional experience. I think I was in a pretty bad place after the post 9/11 wars. I had a lot of concentrated combat exposure from my deployments, and I got to see the great work of emergency physicians and surgeons, nurses. And I had a lot of friends who themselves were injured from blasts or from wounds during combat. And so and also just seeing how medicine could give back people's lives, regardless what side of the aisle they were on. Mm-hmm. You know, civilian, enemies. So I really appreciated the non-prejudicial nature of medicine, of how it can benefit humanity. And so that really touched the core of what I wanted to do. And I found that to be a more sustainable level of service than being a long-term special operator. And don't get me wrong, I miss it on a daily basis, maybe in the same way that General Bolden misses flying or going to space. I miss it. And I miss the camaraderie of it and the service of it. But to me, medicine was a different path to pursue the same spirit of service, just in a different capacity. And so I think that's what it was. It is mostly trying to find an outlet for sustainable service, and also being touched personally by having physicians save the lives of my good friends.
That's a very honest and emotional answer, Dr. Kim. Thank you for. I'd like to end my part of this discussion by asking both of you a question. You went into national service, but not any form of national service. You went into national military service. I know at Harvard, maybe at other schools around the country, national military service is regarded with respect, but also some tension. And I was wondering in your careers, in your lives, how you saw national military service affecting your ability to interact with and relate to civilians and people in America who were loyal and good Americans, but looked at military service as being something a little bit different and maybe a little bit something that had to be questioned. Dr. General Bolden, I don't know if you felt any of that tension in your life, or that was something that.
Without a doubt, but let me. It didn't see it. My life has not been as smooth or as straight a path as some people may think. I saw a program on television called Men of Annapolis about life at the Naval Academy when I was 12 years old. I was at the Naval. I was in 7th grade, and I saw this campus. And what more importantly, as a young man, I saw these guys in these uniforms with the high collars, and then all the girls coming to the campus. So my infatuation with the Naval Academy and the place that I chose to go to college had absolutely nothing to do with a desire to serve in the military. I fell in love with what we came to be known as the Yard, the campus of the Naval Academy, and the uniforms and all the girls that came to the campus seeking midshipmen to make into their husbands. I then found out how difficult it was going to be to get there because you had to have an appointment from a congressman or a senator or the vice president of the United States, unless you were the son of a Medal of Honor winner or an active duty military person. So that meant I had 3 sources: vice president, senator, or congressman. And I started sending notes when I was in 9th grade. And I would get a letter back every year saying, hey, it's a little early. Contact us when you're a senior. And I said, well, I just want you all to know who I am. And then in my senior year, I applied to my 2 U.S. Senators, Strom Thurmond, the notorious Strom Thurmond, and Olin D. Johnston, and to Albert Watson. I promptly got letters back saying not only no, but there is no way we're going to appoint a black to any service academy. And so my only hope became Vice President Lyndon Johnson. And in November 22nd of my senior year, when my football team was going to Charleston, South Carolina to play for the state championship, we got word that President Kennedy had been assassinated. And I was devastated at the loss of a president, but also devastated because I knew that meant the end of any hope that I was going to go to the Naval Academy. But my mom and dad had always told me, don't ever give up on anything. And so I thought about it a little while, and I picked up pen and paper and wrote a letter to the president. And I said, President Johnson, this is Charles Bolden back then. I still want to go to the Naval Academy and I need your help. And never heard from him, but within weeks, a Navy recruiter, much the same as probably Jonny talked to, knocked on my door and said, hey, I understand you want to go to the Naval Academy. And I said, yes, I do. And President Johnson sent a retired federal judge around looking for qualified men of color. There were no women at the time. And I ended up getting an appointment from Congressman William Dawson of Chicago, Illinois. So that's how I got to the Naval Academy. But my love of the military began to mature in my freshman or my plebe year. And it all happened. I went to the Naval Academy saying there are 2 things I'm not going to do. I will not fly airplanes because that's inherently dangerous. And I definitely will not go in the Marine Corps because they're crazy. And my first company officer was a young Marine Corps major, infantry officer by the name of Major John Riley Love. And he was like my dad. He was tough, but unbelievably fair. And 4 years later, when it was time to graduate, I looked back on my 4 years of experience and I said, I can do anything I want to do. I can fly airplanes. I can go submarines. I want to be like him. I want to be like Major Love. And I chose the Marine Corps simply because I wanted to be like Major Love. Found out I did not like crawling around in mud. And I married my wife several days after graduating from the Naval Academy, and she convinced me to go to Pensacola. So I fell into flight school and fell in love with flying the very first time we took off. So long answer to your to your short question. I kind of grew into my affinity for the military, but once I got there and I went through the 4 years of training at the Naval Academy, I realized that the nation, in spite of all that I had been through, the nation had been really good to me. You know, they had trained me at the premier service school in the United States, the U.S. Naval Academy. They had made me a United States Marine and given me an opportunity to serve this nation, and I needed to give something back. And I never, you know, after that, I never looked back. I was always giving back to the nation that had been so good to me. That's a beautiful answer, sir. Especially since you enlisted and served during the American War in Vietnam. Yes. A time during which relations between civilians and soldiers was not as good as we would like them to be. My future wife was at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was at the Naval Academy. And every day that I was on the drill field, I think Jackie was in the streets of Atlanta marching or sitting at a lunch counter or something. So when you ask about the tension, there was incredible tension with my family and friends back home. Because while my mom and dad were enamored with the fact that I had chosen the Naval Academy, not at all excited when I told them I was going in the Marine Corps. They had forgotten that a part of the obligation of going for 4 years of free school was you had to serve in the military. And I think they could have handled it if I'd gone on a ship. Yeah. But saying I was going to be a Marine and go into combat, my dad cried. I mean, my dad cried like a baby. Oh. And I had to convince my family that my decision was okay. And they came to love the Marine Corps over the 34 years I was in it, but they did not, as with many African-American families, they did not want to have anything to do with the military at the time. And ironically, here we are some almost 50 years later, and the military is still struggling with the same thing, trying to get into Johnny's community, into my community, and help people understand that service to the nation through the military is an honorable profession. And so, you know, that's what I try to do all the time.
So many parallels. Just listening to that. Thank you for sharing that. I certainly didn't know the detail of everything you had gone through. And I find it so amazing, Charlie, that of the way your perspective on service, despite the treatment you received, I think it's pretty clear that you deserve better. You and so many deserve better going through, and yet the love you still have and your need to give back is, despite all of that, is humbling. It makes me feel, it's humbling. My mother did not also want me. The Korean American community did not view military service as an honorable. As really an honorable, it was classic, go to law school or go to medical school. And so I had a lot of questions of my judgment to pursue enlisted service to become a SEAL.
Thank you both for these answers, because as you know, our audience is people who are veterans or are thinking about careers. And as I said, you are helping them understand that a career in national military service is something which is genuinely rewarding, even though America is still a very flawed and imperfect place. Dr. Kim, when you came out of the military, it was not like the 1960s and 70s, but there were probably some issues you had to deal with also coming out of the Iraq War and your particular branches of the service.
Certainly, yeah. I don't even want to compare the struggles that I had to go through. Like to previous heroes like Charlie Bolden that have paved the way for people like myself to get through those trials and tribulations and come back. A lot of the trouble I had from my transition was, I think, related to just the nature of the work we did of special operations during that time of the war. I had a pretty extreme perspective on the world that was shaped because of just the aggressive and oftentimes violent nature of the job. And so as a young man, because I had essentially been indoctrinated into the military at the young age of 18, right after high school, it was hard for me when I was transitioning into a commissioning program where I was not surrounded by other special operators. I was not surrounded, the community I was at was extremely alpha male centric. There were no women. There were not many people of color. I was the only, there were a couple African American people, teammates. I was the only Asian American at the team. And so it was, I had formed this identity from being in the SEAL teams and coming back to the civilian world. It was just really hard for me to transition. And, I'm still in the military service, and I'm so thankful for the time I had transitioning into this commissioning program where I got to go to a civilian school. I got to go to Harvard. I got to interact with the non-military world because it helped ground me as a person, as a human being. And I think it's only aided in my perspective and my potential contributions towards service.
Thank you. I think your answer is going to be very helpful to people listening. But as I said, I wanted to leave as much time as possible for people in our video audience to interact with you. Alex, you've been managing the list of questions that people have posted on the chat function. Let me turn it over to you so we can begin to have people pose questions to our two panelists.
I think I can help with this here, Professor. For the first question, I believe we'll be going to James Wang, who is an Air Force ROTC cadet from Stanford. So James. Alex should be promoting you to a panelist here. Yep, there we go.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, it's such a pleasure to be able to ask a question here today. I'm James, a master's student at Stanford. I've wanted to be an astronaut for as long as I can remember, and in the interest of that, I'm going to commission into the Air Force in 2022, along with just being interested in serving in the military. And my question is for Dr. Kim. And your colleague, Colonel Chari, once said to me that one of the most important characteristics of an astronaut is simply having the interpersonal skills that he said people should have learned in kindergarten, like being nice, caring about others, and etc. So my question for you is, how did your military experience deepen these skills? And what about your disposition do you think differentiated you from other astronaut candidate applicants?
So I think may not be the answer you want, but my military service did not help my interpersonal skills outside of the special operations community. What my military service helped me with is to use certain effective tools of leadership, of leading from the front, leading by example, strong moral courage, accountability, hard tools that are effective, especially metaphorically, the hammer as a form of leadership. But those tools are only effective in really narrow circumstances, most of life in the civilian world, in entrepreneurship, in politics, in business, medicine, don't abide or respond to those same tools. So in a lot of ways, my interpersonal skills that are so required, one, just to be a good human being, but also definitely to be a good astronaut, were not developed in my military settings. Sorry, I had to stop my robot from cleaning. So I would have to say that I felt I developed good interpersonal skills being in an academic setting, going to undergraduate school, having friends from diverse backgrounds, being exposed to diverse perspectives, to talking to people who disagree with you, who have the other side of your perspective, and learning how to listen. Those were the interpersonal skills that I needed to ground myself, to be a good person, and also certainly to be a good astronaut.
James, can I add a little bit to what Jonny just said? You know, I am like him. I tell people all the time, I didn't learn everything I needed to know about leadership and everything I needed to know about people. I learned at my dinner table with my mom and dad, to be quite honest. And I thank them. They're looking down on us now from, you know, from above, but I thank them every single day for having the courage to send me away in the summertime to go to National Science Foundation Summer Institutes, where they knew I would probably be the only Black kid there. And they knew that I was going to be one among lots because they knew that the world in which I was going to live, no matter what we thought, it wasn't going to look like my neighborhood in Columbia, South Carolina. Because as school teachers, they had already been exposed to that kind of stuff. I remember my dad as my high school football coach. He, and I apologize for prolonging this, but he used to go on the weekends down to Todd Moore and TNT sporting goods stores. That's where all the coaches met. And, you know, that's where we bought all of our equipment and everything. White, Black, it didn't make any difference. Although the South was segregated, the only two sporting goods stores in Columbia where all the schools had to buy their equipment were Tardmore and TNT. And I met some legendary coaches, Frank Howard from Clemson and, you know, and others, and they were my dad's friends. And he used to sneak my team over. We'd get on the bus and we'd go across the river to Brooklyn Casey High School to play the all-white Brooklyn Casey High School team, because his friend, the coach over there, and my dad knew that if we wanted to be really good players and be competitive, we had to play everybody. And we had to play people who didn't play or think like we did. So I would say that, you know, the more that you can immerse yourself into things that are different from your own culture, one, to help you understand the critical importance of diversity. One of my disappointments with my Marine Corps today is we have a lot of leaders in the Marine Corps who don't buy into the fact that diverse teams are strong teams. They've led them all the time because there's about 40% of the Marine Corps in the enlisted ranks is Black or Asian Pacific Island or Hispanic. That's way more than America, but they're led by an officer corps that's almost all white, and we can't survive that way for long. So we are good because of our diversity. And I think the more you allow yourself and your kids, when you have kids, to be immersed in a really diverse environment, bruises and bumps and all, they'll come out of it much stronger and much more valuable citizens.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
The next question looks like we'll be going to Maxwell Zhu. Maxwell?
Max, you have to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Rosen, and thank you to Dr. Kim and Major General Bolden. It's really awesome to see everyone and meet you guys. My question is for Major General Bolden, though, Dr. Kim, feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts on this. Over the last few decades, we were seeing the commercial sector become much more involved in space exploration and space development. And I'm curious, what if you have any thoughts on whether the future of space exploration will be driven by civil agencies such as NASA, as has been in the past, as has been the experience for both of you, or by commercial companies. So for example, will the roles and responsibilities of NASA astronauts change as we see private astronauts also contribute to space exploration?
You want to take a shot, Jonny? I've got an idea, but I'll let you take a shot first, since you're in the contemporary world of commercial space.
General Bolden's got the 50,000 foot view of the playing field of the chessboard. I'm in it. That is an extremely profound question. Sure, I'll give a shot at it. I think that, I think it's great that the world, America, the entire world is more interested in space exploration. I think the benefits of that are going to come back and trickle their way into our everyday lives, and they're going to plant the seeds. This, I think, the most important. They're going to plant the seeds for the next generation to pursue STEM fields, to pursue climate research, space exploration. It's going to be a good thing. How the roles of government may change. I think NASA will always be driven by government policy, and we won't be shaped by profit margins. And so I think we have the flexibility to pursue missions that may not have an immediate benefit or realized benefit, but have a long-term potential for an investment, for a return on investment. And so, and those things may not always be the most exciting things that are going on in space. But I do think that's where NASA will be able to pursue that, and especially go into areas where the risk is not quantifiable. And thus, when you have a risk that's not quantifiable, it's hard to calculate return on investment. And so maybe it's exploring to Mars or even beyond Mars, where we're not really purely driven by a profit margin, but want to explore the cosmos to bring that back to humanity. So I think that's where we're always going to have a place, even as we get more and more commercial astronauts.
I'd add a couple of things to what Jonny just said. It's really important to remember there's Jeff Bezos and there's Elon Musk, who can independently put their money into space companies. Most of the other companies are out struggling to get funding, and eventually they form a board of directors or something, and they've got to make sure that they don't run afoul of the shareholders and the like. So Jonny is exactly right. What NASA can do as a government organization is accept risk, financial and risk to life and limb, that the private sector probably cannot do. You got onesies and twosies. Elon may be willing to put, he doesn't have an astronaut corps, so I won't say that he's willing to put his people at risk, but he recognizes the fact that he's putting NASA astronaut crews at risk. It'll be a new day for him when he launches the Inspiration 4 crew, as an example, because that's not a government crew, and none of us know what the nuances are about insurance and all that other kind of stuff. Nobody worries about Jonny and me, because they figure the government will take care of it. But I think when those of us who have chosen to go into the government astronaut corps, we recognize the risk, we accept that risk, and at least I can speak for me, I believed it much more firmly after we lost Challenger. I flew my first flight in January of 1986, and we lost Challenger and 7 of my very good friends 10 days later after I landed. And I thought about whether I was in the right line of business. And it took me a nanosecond to say, absolutely. I've got to continue to do what Ron and Dick Scobie and Mike Smith and the rest of the crew were trying to do. I cannot let them down. And so I was driven by the desire to continue the mission that they had begun. I'm not sure that that's there in the private sector, where, as a general rule, profit is the governing factor, just like Jonny said. They've got a balance sheet that they've got to make look right and everything. And NASA gets criticized because they don't pay much attention to that, to be quite honest. But it's because we do things for the nation and to keep the United States at the head of the line in terms of leadership and in exploration of our universe.
Thank you both. That was really insightful. I appreciate it.
And for the next question, we have a question from someone who preferred that I would read it, from Rachel Simmons. She asks if you could each share one particularly challenging experience from your military service that ended up making the transition to becoming an astronaut easier. So any lessons learned from any particularly challenging experience?
Ooh. I don't have one, to be quite honest. My transition to the astronaut program came because I was embarrassed. I had no desire whatsoever to get into the astronaut program. I knew what astronauts were. I was in flight school. I was in Meridian, Mississippi, going through flight school, through basic jet training on the evening that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, and I was mesmerized like people all over the world. I mean, I was blown away, and I said, wow. But there was not 1 ounce of blood in me that said, I want to do that. I just didn't. One of my heroes growing up was Buck Rogers. I went to in South Carolina, we could go to the theater on Saturday mornings, and we sat up in the balcony and we got to see Buck Rogers. We got to see a science fiction movie and a Western. And it was usually The Lone Ranger or Lash LaRue. And then it was almost always Buck Rogers. And I remember seeing Buck Rogers walk out to his spacecraft just like you walk out to your car, jump in it, go to Mars, and come back all in the same day. And I said, man, that's really cool, but I don't want to do that. And I became a test pilot because of one of my flight instructors who had been a Marine Corps test pilot. And it was infatuating listening to him about the experience. And so I was at Patuxent River, Maryland as a test pilot the year that NASA selected its first group of space shuttle astronauts. And among them was the late, great Dr. Ron McNair, who was a dear friend of mine that I did not know growing up. Ron was Black like me, had grown up about 42 miles from me in a little bitty city in South Carolina called Lake City. Ron McNair, anyone who knew him would tell you, Ron was going to be an astronaut from the day he was born. That's all he ever wanted to do, compared to Charlie Bolden, who had no desire to be an astronaut. Ron became an astronaut. He went to North Carolina A&T, majored in physics, went to MIT, got a PhD in laser physics, and got into the astronaut corps. And he came back to Pax River along with some of the Navy and Marine Corps pilots for a reunion. And I saw this Black guy get out of the back of this sleek-looking NASA T-38, and I ran over and I started talking to him. We talked the whole weekend, and I was mesmerized. And he got ready to go back to Houston that Sunday afternoon. He said, hey, are you going to apply for the space program? And I looked at him and I said, Ron, not on your life. And he looked at me real strange. He said, why not? I said, they never picked me. And he said, Charlie, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. How do you know if you don't ask? And I mean, I felt about that big because I had forgotten everything that my mom and dad had told me at that dinner table about you can do anything you want to do if you're willing to really study hard and work hard, and don't be afraid of failure. Don't let anybody tell you what you cannot do. And Ron got in his supersonic jet, went back to Houston, and I went and picked up pen and paper, and I applied for the program, got nominated to NASA by the Marine Corps, got an opportunity to go to Houston and interview. And lo and behold, much to my surprise, I got a call saying, hey, do you still want to be an astronaut? And so I was accepted into the second group of space shuttle astronauts. So, not a lifelong ambition at all. And I kind of stumbled into it, but that's kind of the way my life has been. I follow my passion. I do things I like to do because I enjoy them. And I figure if what I like to do doesn't get me to places where people think I ought to be, so be it. I'm going to be happy and I'm going to enjoy myself. And so that's kind of the way I've lived my life.
I think Charlie, thanks for sharing that. Just listening to you, I realized we have so much in common. I never wanted to be an astronaut. There's no way. I didn't even think about being an astronaut until like 6 months before the applications even opened up. And primarily because I'm like people who, for one, growing up, you don't, here's the thing with diversity that people don't really realize. And it's subconscious, but when you don't see people that you can identify with that look like you, or for whatever reason that you can identify with in these positions, you just don't think that it's possible. It doesn't come to you like, oh, I can do that. I had a picture of the Apollo 11 crew above my bed.
Oh yeah.
As a kid. I don't know where I got it from, but I never once said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that, because I didn't have the confidence to dream like that. And people who look like me just didn't do that kind of stuff. So who am I to think that I could do something like that? And I've only been lucky, really fortunate to have these opportunities that have, one, made me realize that, oh, wow, if you work hard enough, if you fail hard enough, if you are you have a good attitude, you're actually a lot more capable than you think you are, and you surprise yourself. And it was only until maybe 6 months before the applications opened up that I met Scott Pierzynski, And he was like, you can definitely do this. I'm like, really? Like people like me get selected? He was like, yeah, you should try it. So, and I've always followed my passions. I think one thing that that is, not really irk me, but when people read what I've done, is that, skip from being a special operator to medicine to now being an NASA astronaut. And for me, I never had a plan. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do after NASA. I don't know if you knew what you were going to do after NASA. I don't know what I'm going to do after NASA, but I do know it's going to be in public service. And that's a commitment I made to a lot of my friends who are 6 feet under, that I'm going to pursue public service. It's going to be impactful. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to be in the same vein of what I want to do. And so I have the same approach as you, Charlie. I just follow my passions. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And as long as it fills the check in the box of being impactful in service, I'm all good. I know I'm not answering the original question, which is what did I learn to help me be an astronaut? And I was thinking about it. And I actually think I think a lot of the things that I learned in the military were more on how to conduct oneself in challenging times, how to lead by example. I think mostly leadership lessons. But I think maybe one story in particular is, I think, standing up for the right thing, regardless if there is a power differential there. And one quick story for me is that I was overseas in Iraq in 2006, and I had a friend that I was tending to who was shot in the face. And we had stopped off at this aid station along the way because I was trying to tend to him to get back to the aid hospital in Camp Ramadi. And we stopped off in this aid station that had no power, no running water, just this hole in the wall in the middle of nowhere. And it was being led by an officer who, I think he was doing what he thought was best, but he was also he had ego that I think clouded his judgment, and felt that he needed his hands on the patient before this person was packaged to Camp Ramadi. And given the severity of my friend's wounds, this was not an appropriate decision. And this senior officer wanted to do a medical procedure, and he eventually ended up doing it. The details are maybe outside the scope, but it was a medical procedure that hurt my friend, and I knew it was the wrong thing to do. And I tried to fight, and I didn't fight hard enough. And because I didn't fight hard enough, someone got hurt. And so we see a lot of things in our daily life where we know it's not the right thing to do. Maybe you see someone being treated poorly, or maybe you see something that there's opportunities. And a lot of times we know what the right thing to do, but it's sometimes really hard to do it. And so I made a promise after that regardless of, and I was just an E5 at the time, and certainly there was a power differential with an E5 versus an O4. But I made the promise that I'd never make that mistake again, regardless. And that, I think, is relevant in medicine, is relevant in leadership, politics, especially relevant in human spaceflight, as Charlie can attest to, in that we accept this risk. But if we see something that we know is not right, we need to speak up, regardless of the backlash or challenges we may come across in doing so.
Jonny, I'm going to echo what you said. Like I said, I flew my first space shuttle mission. You couldn't be higher than when you come back from going to space the first time. And 10 days later, I lost 7 dear friends. And I knew that I lost them because we hadn't spoken up, because we had sat back and allowed things that we knew were wrong, but could be fixed. We had allowed them to persist because they didn't hurt anybody. We kept getting away with it. And but I learned a critical lesson then. So I echo what you say, and speak up. We have the Navy and the Marine Corps have what we call our core values: honor, courage, and commitment. And we all learn them when we go to recruit training or officer candidate school or whatever. And we talk about them all the time, but I'm not sure we think about what they really mean. But the honor part means exactly what it talks about. It means being a person of integrity, not deceiving people, no matter whether it hurts you or not, speaking truth to power. The courage part is the one that I always come back to, though, because everybody thinks about, Jonny is a SEAL, I'm a Marine, everybody thinks when we talk about courage, we're talking about taking a bullet for somebody. That's not it. That's not it at all. It's exactly what Jonny was just talking about. It's the courage of your convictions. It's the courage to say no when you know something's not right. And in this day and age, it's the courage to speak out against hatred and bigotry and extremism. Extremism on either end of the political spectrum is divisive and horrible for the country. We've got to get people back to the middle. And the only way we do that is for those of us who believe in the middle and who understand civics and the fact that compromise is a really, really, really important part of our democratic system of government. What goes on in Congress today, it's an abomination. When we say, okay, I am not going to compromise with anybody, and I'm happy with Congress doing nothing, that's not the United States. And so when you talk about courage, it's saying, when you hear someone say something about a member of your team that's not of the same race or that's not of the same gender, going over and saying, hey, look, I'm not sure where you came from, not sure what you were taught, but where I come from, we don't do that. That's my sister in arms, that's my brother in arms, and I will not tolerate you doing that. If you look at the Marine Corps and what the Lionesses did in Iraq and Afghanistan, we would not have had the victories we had were it not for women Marines, enlisted for the most part, who enabled us to get into villages and talk to people and save people's lives. So, Jonny is absolutely right. We have got to have the courage to stand up and say what's on your mind and keep people from just doing crazy stuff like we're doing today.
Hoorah. Well said. Well said.
For the next question, we have a question from Tom Featherston. Tom?
Sorry, that took me a second. First of all, thank you, doctors, General, for your time this evening. General, you mentioned that we should consider being a teacher. What do either of you believe is the most important lesson or message that we should strive to teach our civilian counterparts? And then to build on that, do you believe it is our experience in combat or in service that makes these lessons valuable?
Well, I think your combat experiences are unbelievable, because that's when I've heard the saying. I happen to be a person of faith, so let me start there. Everybody is not. When I was a commanding general of 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, we set up a campaign plan that was called Putting Marines First, and we emphasized 3 things: mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. Because we knew we were going into Iraq. There was no question in our minds. The government had not talked about it yet, but we knew we were going. And I wanted to make sure that my Marines would be fully prepared. So I wasn't worried about physical health for Marines. They're physical nuts. The mental health and the spiritual health I was worried about, because we have a lot of Marines who are Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, you name it, and some atheists. And my point that I got my chaplain to head up this part of the program. My point was that everyone should be free to worship in whatever way they choose, or not worship, because they were a part of the team. And the more we understood their particular religious beliefs and gave them the room to have that and feel comfortable with it, the stronger we were going to be as a team. The mental health part was, Jonny will tell you, he's been in much more combat than I have. I'm an aviator, so I've never been in a combat battle on the ground. But when people start shooting at you, you get scared. And if you don't get scared, there's something wrong. You have, well, I think psychologists call it no apparent fear of death. That's not good. You need to be afraid. And Marines particularly feel some embarrassment in feeling afraid. And I wanted all of them to understand that, there are going to be moments when you're going to be scared shitless. Excuse my French. That's okay. But, find somebody that you can talk to and share that with. And so I think helping our brothers and sisters in arms understand that their mental health, their physical health, and their spiritual health is really important to us. and that we're going to be a part of allowing them to be who they are so that we can become a much more stronger and cohesive team. I think that's really, really, really important.
I was trying to think about the question you asked, Thomas. I think it's a great question. I see on your right wrist you've got you've got an honor bracelet, so I imagine you've seen some stuff. I think combat exposure can help veterans just as much as it can hurt veterans. I personally think it's a double-edged sword in being able to relate and communicate and teach our civilian brothers and sisters. And for me, when you said, what is a lesson learned from military experience that would be beneficial to teach our civilian brothers and sisters, I had a hard time thinking about it, because really most of the lessons that have been beneficial for me to be impactful on other people were learned from civilians. It was the other way around, really. I didn't learn vulnerability in the military. And like Charlie Bolden was saying, it was not okay to be weak was an association with, it's not like that anymore. I think we have done a good job understanding that combat exposure and the fallout that comes from it is not weakness. It just shows you're human. But when I was going through BUDS and everything in 02, it had a different tune, and it wasn't as okay to talk about your feelings or the stuff you were going through after combat. And that hurt. It hurt me. It hurt a lot of my friends, and it delayed a lot of the healing that needed to happen. And I learned to open up and be a better communicator and a better human being from working with civilian brothers and sisters than I actually learned in the military. So when I try and think about your question, I honestly feel like I can bring back more to my military brothers and sisters from what I learned from the civilian side of things. And that's opening yourself up, understanding that we're all human. It's okay to be afraid. Oh my gosh, I was so scared my first firefight. It was just terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. And but just scared for your life. And you resort to your training, and God, you're still pretty scared going through. And there's so much. I think what we can bring, if to answer your question, I guess what I can bring is, I think compromise. I think learning to compromise with a team of diverse backgrounds to complete a mission. And I think melding those experiences from combat, from the military, into the civilian side of things, or to really any group, which is why I love NASA, because it's not a DoD organization. It's a civilian organization, yet it does have a slight, sometimes DoD-ish feel, just because many of the astronauts are military. It's not a military organization, but bringing those skills, those life lessons learned from extreme experiences like combat, but also melding that with what it's like to be a human, that I really have learned from the civilian side of things. So I don't know if that answered your question, Thomas, but I thought it was a great one.
It did. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Hey, Dr. Rosen and Nick, can I point of personal privilege here? Can I thank somebody who's on tonight, and that's General Mike Leonard, who introduced me to Alex and others in these programs. I would not have been here had it not been for him. I served with Mike when we were both in 1 MEF out in Camp Pendleton, and admire him. He's in Traverse City, Michigan, and Jack Siegel has a question on there about working with the Chinese. So I'm going to give you my answer real quick. I am a China fan, and you got to understand what I'm saying here. I'm a China fan in terms of working with them in space flight, understanding, trying to build trust. NASA is a soft power, one of the best soft power tools we have in the nation. And just as we learned to work with the Soviets, and today, when Jonny goes to the International Space Station, he's probably going to fly with a doggone Russian cosmonaut. And that's going to become one of the best friends that he's ever had, like Sergei Krikalev is with me today, after flying with him in 1994. we can work with anybody if we're willing to meet them halfway, and if we establish some principles of when you talk about honor, courage, and commitment, but we've got to be transparent in what we do. There's got to be mutual benefit for us, and there's got to be something that each of us gets from it. And we work with the Chinese today when it comes to planetary science and to earth science, and there's no reason we can't work successfully with them in human spaceflight. But that's an opinion of one.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. And I apologize to all of the attendees that have submitted questions that weren't answered. We had a lot of other fantastic questions here, but unfortunately we are out of time just about here. Briefly, Dr. Rosen, is there anything else you would want to mention in conclusion? And then I'll, after that, just turn the floor over to the president of HUGO for a quick closing remark.
I just want to state what is obvious, I think, to everyone who's been listening. Dr. Kim and General Bolden, you've given us truth from the from inside you. You've been personal, you've been honest, and you've been extraordinarily powerful because of that honesty and because of your willingness to open up and let us see what you felt and see how you looked at the world. So I think all of us have a feeling of having experienced something special, which will change the way we look at the world, and maybe not a little bit. So thank you both.
Yeah, true honor and pleasure. Thank you.
To echo what Dr. Rosen said, thank you, Dr. Kim, Major General Bolden, for coming. I was blown away by your testimonies, by your experiences, and with the vulnerability you showed, especially with the resumes that y'all have. It's incredible to see the humility that y'all possess and how y'all are so able to reflect on your experiences, both the good and the bad, and just learn from them and learn from the people around you. So thank you so much. Dr. Rosen, thank you for leading the conversation. It was incredible to have you. Thank you for all of our attendees for joining us tonight. If you want to learn more about the Alexander Hamilton Society, they'll be hosting an event on the 24th for Harvard students. You can learn more on their page and learn more about what Harvard veterans are doing at whovets.com. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for attending tonight.
Thanks to all of you. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you, General. Thanks, Dr. Kim.
Take care of those kids, Johnny.
I will. They're waiting for me. Take care, everyone.
All right.